Just popping the hood right now on this side. I'm going to walk up to the vehicle and I'm looking under it for leaks, such as oil, coolant, or fuel, and I don't see any. So then I'm going to pop my hood. Okay, everything on this particular truck is on the left side, so we can pretty much do everything on the left side. Okay. So, first thing I check on this truck is I'll look directly under the engine and transmission for leaks, such as oil or transmission fluid. From there, I will check my hoses and clamps, my main hoses and clamps. Make sure they're securely connected at both ends. The clamps are secure and tight. They are not leaking. There are no bulges, no cuts, no cracks, no abrasive damage, and they are not rubbing on any other parts. Okay, from there I'm just going to drop right down to my belts. I have an alternator, water pump, and fan belt. They are, I always say secure on everything. They are securely attached. They do not deflect more than 1/2 to 3/4 inch from the center of the belt. They are not cut, cracked, no loose fibers, not frayed, and no excessive wear. From there I'm going to drop to my alternator itself. The alternator is securely mounted, no loose or missing nuts or bolts, no bare, broken, burned, or exposed wiring. It operates properly and is in good condition. I think I got that all. I'm going to keep... And it's belt driven. Thank you. Belt driven is my alternator. I want to make sure I get this right, so I'm going to go to my papers. Okay, so next we're going to check my coolant. Make sure that it's visible in the coolant reservoir, and that's pretty much all you have to say. Not leaking. I've already done that. My air compressor. Okay, my air compressor on this is back here. Okay, it is secured. There's no loose or missing nuts and bolts. No fluid or air leaks. It is gear driven. Operates properly. And good condition. Okay, that's it on that one. My water pump in front of the engine behind the belts is securely mounted, no loose or missing nuts and bolts, no leaks, and it is belt driven. And I might as well say it operates properly and good condition. My power steering fluid, which is right here, I would make sure it's in safe operating range and above the fill line, and make sure it's not leaking. My power steering pump. Okay, on this one, believe it or not, the power steering pump, you have to follow the hoses. It's back there. Okay, just follow the hoses and it's back there below the air compressor. Okay, so my power steering pump is gear driven, it's secured, no loose or missing nuts or bolts, it's not leaking and not cracked. Okay, my oil dipstick, which is right here, I would make sure that it's in safe operating range and above the fill line and not leaking. My power steering hoses, which are these right here. Okay. The hoses show no signs, they're securely connected at both ends. They show no signs of cuts, cracks, bulges, or abrasive damage, and they are not rubbing on other parts. My steering box, which is right here, is securely mounted, no loose or missing nuts or bolts, and no cracks or leaks. Operates properly. No, it's gear driven. Gear driven. Okay, my steering linkage arms and rods, which are here, here, and here. Okay, they are secure. No worn, bent, or cracked parts. no loose or missing nuts, bolts, or cotter keys, and no worn, loose, or cracked sockets. Okay, so that does it for that part. Now we're going to drop down to my suspension. My leaf springs, which are down there, okay, we're going to make sure they're secured, and we're checking for any missing, shifted, cracked, or broken leaf springs. My hangers. The hangers are what the leaf springs are attached to, right here and one on the other end. They are secured, no loose or missing nuts, bolts. They are not cracked, and there are no worn, damaged, or missing bushings. The bushings are inside the hanger, you can't really see them. Okay, my U-bolts, which are underneath the airbags, the U-bolts, they attach the leaf springs to the axle. They are secured, and I would check for loose, cracked, broken, or missing U-bolts. My shock absorbers. You see the shock absorber back there? It's secured, no leaks, no loose or missing nuts and bolts. From there, we're going to go to my airbags. Give me a second. It's in a different part of the picture here. My airbags. Okay, my airbags, which you're looking at right now, are securely mounted, no loose or missing nuts or bolts. They are not leaking or deflated, and there are no cuts or bulges in my airbags. My airbag mounts are what mount the airbag. They're on top and bottom there. They are secured with no loose or missing nuts and bolts. They are not cracked or broken. Okay, now we're going to go to my brakes. And I can get back to it. We're going to start with my brake hoses and lines, or hose couplings. You see those down there? Okay. They are securely connected. They are not leaking. I would make sure that the hoses are not cracked, worn, bulging, no signs of abrasive damage, and that they're not rubbing on other parts, and they are not cut. My brake chambers, which are these right here. They are securely mounted, no loose or missing nuts, bolts, or clamps. No cracks, no dents, and they're not leaking. My slack adjusters is on the front of the brake chamber right there. They are secured. There's no broken, loose, or missing parts. And I would check the brake adjustment and slack adjuster for no more than 1 inch of movement on the push rod stroke. Okay? My brake linings, brake shoes, and drums. My brake linings, the pads are at least 1/4 of an inch thick. They are not cracked, and there are no loose or missing components. My drums, I would make sure there are no cracks, holes, dents, or grooves to my brake drums. I would also make sure there's no sign of oil or grease on either linings or drums. Okay, from there we're going to jump up to my front axle, which is my tires. I would make sure that my front tires have a minimum tread depth of 4/32. The tread is evenly worn. There's no abrasions, bumps, or cuts to the tread or the sidewall. No sign of tread separation. My valve stems, if you can find it down there, it's down there, are not missing, broken, or damaged, and I would check my inflation with a tire gauge. Okay. My wheels and flange. This is your wheel, and the outer edge is called the flange. Wheels and flange. They have no cracks and no welds. There are no cracks radiating from the lug bolt holes, and there's no distortion or egg-shaped lug bolt holes. My lug nuts. Make sure they're all tight. There are none missing. There are no rust trails or shiny threads. My axle seals, which is just right here, I would make sure that they were not leaking both inside and out, and that my oil level was full. Okay? From there, we're done with that. Now we're going to come to my doors and my mirrors on the outside. Okay, I would open my door and make sure that my hinges of my door are secured. They're not cracked, and there's no loose or missing nuts or bolts. My door itself opens and closes securely, and my door seals are intact. Okay? And the door is not damaged. Okay, my mirrors are securely mounted. You want to kind of grab onto it. The mirrors and mirror brackets are securely mounted, they're not cracked, and there's no loose fittings or missing parts on my mirrors. My fuel tank, which is right here, make sure my caps are tight, my tanks are securely mounted, there's no loose or missing nuts, bolts, or mounting parts, and there's no leaks from my tank or my crossover line. The crossover goes from one tank to the other. It's got 2 tanks on it. Okay, from there we're going to move back. Steps. My tractor steps are securely mounted to the frame. There are no loose or missing nuts and bolts, and there's no obstructions, and they're solid. Okay, now we're going to go, on this truck you can't see it, but we're going to go to the drive shaft. It runs underneath my catwalk here. Speaking of catwalk, we're going to check it same as steps, okay? Securely mounted, solid, no loose or missing nuts and bolts, and no obstructions. My drive shaft. It's securely mounted, it's not bent or cracked. There are no loose or missing nuts, bolts, or shaft couplings, and there is nothing lodged in my shaft couplings. My exhaust system, which I've got 2 exhaust systems on this, make sure they're securely mounted, tightly connected, no loose or missing nuts or bolts, clamps or mounting brackets, no cracks, holes, no dents, and no signs of exhaust leaks such as rust or carbon soot. My tractor frame and cross members. There's no cracks or bends, there's no loose or missing nuts or bolts, and there's no cracks in my cross members. Okay? So that's it for that. Now we're going to jump right into my air and electrical lines. My air lines are the red and the blue line, and my electrical line is the gray one. All of my lines are secured at both ends. None are cut, spliced, cracked, chafed, or excessively worn. They are not pinched or rubbing on other parts for all lines. My steel braid is not showing through on my electrical line. My trailer connectors, which are these on the trailer, okay, my trailer connectors are sealed and not damaged, and my glad hands, which are these, are locked in place and not leaking. Okay, so that's it for that. Alright, now we get into my 5th wheel. Got my exhaust, I got my drive shaft, I got air and electrical lines. My 5th wheel. First of all, we've got mounting bolts. Those are the bolts that mount the 5th wheel assembly to the frame. Okay, we're making sure there's no loose or missing brackets, nuts, or bolts. My platform base is the wide part of the 5th wheel. It's the widest part of it. Okay, it's securely mounted to the securely mounted to the tractor frame. There are no cracks, no breaks, and no loose or missing nuts or bolts. My 5th wheel skid plate. The skid plate is on top of the platform base. You can't see it. It's up against the bottom of the trailer. It's securely mounted to the platform, properly lubricated, and all of my bolts and pins are secure with none missing. My release arm, which is the arm that you see coming out right there on the bottom of the platform base. Make sure it's secured in the locked position and the safety latch is engaged. My kingpin is what locks the trailer to the 5th wheel. You can't see it either, but it's locked in right now. Make sure it's not bent, and I would make sure that my locking jaws on the 5th wheel were fully closed around the kingpin shank. My apron is the bottom steel plate of the trailer. Bottom steel plate of the trailer. Make sure it's not bent, cracked, or broken. Gap is nothing more than you don't want to see any daylight between the bottom of the trailer and the top of the 5th wheel. No daylight, no gap. Okay, and last on the 5th wheel is I would make sure that my tractor frame would clear my landing gear during turns. Okay? That's it for my 5th wheel. Now we're going to get into my rear suspension and brakes. We're going to start off with suspension. We're going to check my leaf springs, my U-bolts, my hangers, my shock absorbers, my airbags, and my airbag mounts. Check same as front. That's all you have to say. Okay? Because if you'll notice, I broke everything down on the front. Now, with the exception is I've got a torque arm. There's a torque arm, which I don't know if you could see it. I think on this one you can't really see it. It's up underneath between the frame. So you just want to talk about your torque arm. It's securely mounted. No loose or missing nuts, bolts, or mounting parts, and make sure it's not broken or cracked. Okay. My brakes. I would check my brake hoses and lines, my brake chambers and clamps, my slack adjusters, my linings, and my drums, the same as I did the front. My tires, my wheels, my flanges, my lug nuts, my axle seals, and my valve stems, I would check same as front, with the exception of minimum 2/32 on my tires. Okay, these are single tires, so that's all I have to talk about on those. Mud flaps. I would make sure that my mud flaps are securely mounted, no loose or missing nuts and bolts, they are not worn or torn, and they hang to at least the center of the axle. Okay, my landing gear. Oops, I didn't. No, never mind. I went too far. Okay. Okay, let's go back. I forgot something. Don't forget this front end structure. All that is the front of your trailer. Make sure it's not damaged. There's no cracks, no bulges, and no missing rivets. Okay? That's it for your front end structure. Now we're going to go to my landing gear. My landing gear, I would make sure that it is fully raised, which it is. There are no missing parts. My crank handle, which is right here, is secure. There are no cracks, no broken welds, no loose or missing nuts or bolts, and no damage to my landing pads, which are those. Okay? That's it on that. Trailer frame and cross member. I would check to make sure there are no cracks or bends, and no loose or missing nuts, bolts, and no damage to my trailer floor. I would also say no cracks in my cross members. Now we're going to get to the back. On this trailer we have what's called a tandem release arm. I'm going to have to get in between the tools here. There's a release arm on my trailer frame, okay? I would make sure that the release arm is engaged and secured and my locking pins are locked in place. If you go to the front of the tire, you can see the locking pins. See them sticking out of the hole? Mm-hmm. So I would make sure my locking pins are locked in place and my release arm is engaged and secured. Okay, my trailer suspension. I would check my leaf springs, my hangers, my U-bolts, my shock absorbers, and my torque arm, same as rear of tractor. There are no airbags on this trailer, so you don't have to mention them. My brakes, my brake hoses and lines, my brake chambers and clamps, my slack adjusters, my linings, and my drums, I would check same as rear of tractor. My tires, my wheels, my flanges, my lug nuts, valve stems, and axle seals, same as rear of tractor, with the exception of these are duals. So I make sure there's nothing lodged between my duals, and my duals are not touching. I think I'm going to skip over that. That'll be this part. I'm just going to go with that. Okay. I would check my mud flaps on the rear of the trailer, same as rear of tractor. My rear doors. I would check to make sure my rear doors are not damaged. I would make sure they open and close securely. The hinges are not damaged or cracked with no loose or missing nuts or bolts. At this time, I would check the right side, same as the left. Now we're done. That's it on the pre-trip.